hopefully, by the end of this workshop that will have a good idea, if you haven't already started a resume, or if you have one, what needs to be done to really get it in, a position where you can utilize that resume. So I am an HR manager for a public accounting firm who offers typical accounting, audit, tax services, as well as business advisory. So I have been with the firm for, I've been doing it for a very long time. So I've been working, in a public accounting firm as in HR for about 25 years. So most of the resumes that I've seen, in the last 25 years are much more related to the accounting field. But, I have, coached individuals in a variety of industries in, putting resumes together. So during the presentation, as Laurent said, we are taping it. So if you have a question, you can put it in the chat box. However, if you would prefer to, ask the question in person, do feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question. But we will have time at the end for questions at that time. So, all right, so let's get started. All right, so how do you start this process? So what you need to do before you even start, kind of typing something, is you really should take some time to step back and look to see what you want to include on your resume. So first of all, as college students, the first thing you want to present will be your education, your educational information. You will want to include experiences, so whether that's related to work, internships, volunteer things that you do, sports that you play, any extracurricular activities. It could be a sorority, it could be a club that you're in, any skill sets that have to do with, computer programs, things like have, intermediate skills in, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, any certifications you may have, as well as, depending on your degree, you may have publications that you've done. You may have attended workshops. You may have, for accounting students, a lot of them will join the Mass Society of CPAs as a student member. So there's a lot of areas that you may want to include in your resume, and that's going to depend on what you're going to use it for. But what you really need to do is kind of put everything down first, and and then you can really determine, based on what you're going to use the resume for, what should go on in that resume. And you may have more than one. So, with regards to the work experiences, one of the things that you may need to do a little research on is, a lot of individuals, have had a job previously and they're like, well, I don't remember, when I actually worked at that, at that employer. You need to take the time to get that information, because you will need to include at least the month and the year when you started and when you finished that, the position. So, okay, so we mentioned purpose of the resume. So, there's a variety of reasons why you may be putting a resume together. So you may be applying for an internship. You could be applying to a, full-time position because you're graduating. You might be applying to grad school. So, depending on, what you're going to use the resume for may determine what you're going to include in that resume. But your goal is to present the best you, and you want to, present that in the best possible light. So, you're going to use that to, give employers or schools or whoever it may be, some good information about who you are and the experiences that that you've had. From my perspective, what am I looking for from that resume? A couple of things. One of the things that, I am going to sort those resumes and make a determination as to who I'm going to actually move forward with, whether it's a phone interview or in-person interview. But I'm going to sort them, and I'm going to say, yes, here are the individuals that I'm going to meet. here are my no's that, I'm not interested in moving forward. And then I'll have some individuals that I might. So, what are the reasons why I may eliminate that resume? And, one of the first things that I tell individuals, if I see a resume that is not well organized and not well put together, and I see, even typographical errors or whatever, I will typically will just eliminate that person. I won't look to see what the content is in that resume because it's not presented well. And so it doesn't, put your best step forward. So, the first thing you need to, think about is making sure that your resume is presented well, it's concise, and it looks neat and organized. Then what I'll do is then I will take, another 15, 20 seconds to really look at, the bulk of the resume and see what are the skills and experiences that you're going to bring to that job. So, and then I will start eliminating individuals based on, those other items that are, included in your resume. Okay, so the first thing you're going to include on your resume is what I want to know is how do I get in touch with you? So, it's very important. Some individuals will say, well, do I really need to include, my address? I'm living at school, but I don't live here all the time. That will be up to you. I find it very helpful to know. So, I have some individuals that will send a resume and they will put their school address, on one side and then their permanent address on the other. It's really dependent upon you. But, there are a number of ways to present the information, and it will also depend on how much information that you have on the resume. And as you can see in the first example, the individual is, putting the information straight across. Well, that saves you a lot of space. So if you have a lot of information you're going to want to include on the resume, that may be the best way to present your information. But you're going to want to, provide your address, the phone number where an individual can reach you, as well as an email address. Individuals are now asking, should I always include my LinkedIn, address? And my thing is, yes, include it, but make sure if you are going to include your LinkedIn profile, that you have it up to date. That, when I, make a decision to actually, okay, let me, take a look and see, how they present themselves on LinkedIn, that your profile is, well put together, on LinkedIn. Okay. Okay, so after, all of your contact information as a college student, the next, typical thing you're going to list on your resume is your academic experiences. So as you can see from this example, you do not need to include high school. So once you're in college, you don't need to put your list your high school on the resume anymore. So here, as you can see, this individual attended Massasoit for their first couple of years, and then are currently attending Bridgewater State University. So it's important for you to include your degree. If you have a minor or a concentration, you should include it. This individual did include a statement saying that they are financing their education on their own and they are working part-time. That is helpful to an employer to know that, not only is this student going to school, but they're also, working and, financing that education. So you can also include your GPA. I highly recommend, that you do include the GPA because it's probably going to be asked. You're going to be asked that question anyway. Hopefully, you all have a GPA of at least 3.0. To be able to, to put that on there. And you can also put, the number of semesters that you, have been on the dean's list. So, I do recommend you put the GPA. If you prefer not to, that's okay as well. But just be prepared, to have that discussion, with an employer or the school that you're applying to. The other, thing that you may include as part of your academic experience is that, I'm sure that some of you will have some study abroad experiences, and this is where you would present that. Are there any questions so far that you would prefer to ask now rather than waiting to the end? Or are we good? We're good?
Don't see any in the chat box right
Okay.
now.
Okay, so experience. So, this is typically where, a lot of your information is going to be presented. And as you can see, there's a wide variety of experiences that you may have that you're going to want to include on the resume. So, and it's going to depend too as well on your degree. So you'll see that there is a specific section for related experience. So, if you've done an internship, whether, if you're an accounting major and you've had an internship, in an accounting department or at a, public accounting firm, or if you're a marketing, major and you worked for a consulting firm and interned in their marketing department, those are going to be experiences that are directly related to your degree and most likely the full-time position you're going to be applying for when you graduate. Professional experiences, there are many individuals who may have already had, prior, experiences in a professional, environment, but they've gone back to school, to get a degree in, in something else. So, that is where you would want to present those other, experiences that you've had. For those that are going to school for education, you're going to have student teaching experiences, or a variety of other experiences that you'll want to include that will be, important. The work experience, what I would recommend is, some people say, well, you know what, I've only worked at, Stop and Shop. It's really not relevant to, to what I want to do. And what you have to realize is that, those types of experiences, you certainly learn, a variety of things in those types of, environments. So it's important to, include those things, and whether you call it work experience, employment, other experience, whatever you want to, call it. But, it's still important to include those things. A lot of times, if you have worked, I don't know, at a camp or, like I said, in retail, whatever, and you may have done that for a long period of time, that can tell an employer, that you have actually, you know, stayed somewhere for, maybe it was, a couple of years while you were in high school and you're still working there and you're now a junior in college and you've, been working for the same, employer for 4 to 5 years. That's an important, thing to present to an employer. So, other experiences may include things like community service, where you've been involved in, a variety of volunteer experiences, and then extracurricular activities, which again, very broad, area, because that could include, things like sports. If you're playing sports, it could be clubs that you're involved in. It could be Greek life. It could be anything. A variety of things. So, and kind of how do you present those things? And as you can see, there's a couple of different ways that you can present. One is you put the job title first, the name of the company that you worked for or are working for, where the employer is, and then your dates, and then you list your duties. Or you can put the organization first and where it is located, and your job title underneath, and the dates over to the side, and then list your responsibilities. So again, it's, really personal preference. I don't think one is better than the other, as long, again, as it's consistent throughout your resume, and it's, well well organized. So I think I saw that maybe a couple of questions popped up in the chat box.
Yes, so we have one question. If you're applying for an internship, would you keep the experience that is related to your major in your resume?
So if you're applying to an internship and you have already have related experience, is that the?
I believe so. And Angel, if that's not it, if you can type in what it is or pop on and let us know your question.
I mean, I guess I'm trying to figure out exactly what the question is. I mean, are they saying that if you already have experience and you want to apply to an internship, would you still be considered for an internship because you already have experience? Is that what the question is? So I guess maybe we can wait till the end, and whoever that question is from, you know, they can kind of clarify a little bit, you know, what they meant by that. So, okay.
Yeah, that sounds good. But yes, definitely if you're applying, as you said, you'll want your related experience listed on there on your resume for the internship, as long as it's related to the field that you're applying for. So if that's the question, if it's related, if it's, you know, if you're an accounting major and you're applying for an accounting internship and you've had some accounting experience, yep, that would be related. But if, you know, you had some experience in customer service, that may not be necessarily considered related experience. But if that doesn't address it, we'll definitely circle back to this at the end.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so, you know, the next thing when you're presenting your, you know, work experiences, you know, you need to present, you know, what you actually did during those experiences. And so, you know, what you first need to do is determine, you know, and again, it's going to depend on how many experiences you want to present on the resume. What I typically say is, you know, to determine how many action statements you want to put for each experience is going to depend on, first of all, how relative, you know, related it is, and also how current. You know, so, you know, if it's something that you did, you know, previously, which isn't that related, well, you might only need to put one or two, you know, bullet point action statements. But if it's a current job that you're doing, you might want to, you know, be a little more detailed and include, you know, 4 or 5 bullet points. So, you know, you really need to determine that based on, you know, the position itself. But, you know, with regards to action statements and, you know, how you want to present that information, there are a lot of resources out there that can help you, you know, kind of find some examples of those things. I know that Career Services does have a packet that's put together, and in that packet, it includes a great list of action, you know, action verbs that you can start your statements with. You know, on, you know, in the accounting world, you know, things like, you know, I don't know, accurately, you know, I don't know, but what you need to really do is determine kind of what you actually physically did. And if you go on to, you know, ONET or Indeed, and you do a search even for like a sample resume of a, you know, a cashier, you'd be surprised as to, you know, how you can present that information, and you know, the words that you can use to just, you know, describe what you're actually doing. So, you know, it's important to, again, quantify and qualify, you know, the things that you've done. So, you know, for instance, if you worked as a camp counselor, you know, you want to, you know, quantify, you know, the age ranges of the, you know, individuals that you worked with. You might want to include things that are related to the number, you know, the number of, you know, children that you were responsible for. So, you know, you do want to, you know, try and put some quantifying and qualifying things in those action statements. So, and the other thing that you do want to highlight, you know, any major accomplishments that you had, you know, during that time frame. You know, for sales, you know, if you were required to, you know, do so many, you know, calls to, you know, potential customers, you know, you would want to quantify that and how many may have led to a successful second call for for an individual. So you just want to think about those kinds of things. But like I said, the packet that you can get from Career Services has some great list of action verbs that you can use. But I would try and be as clear and concise as possible. You don't want to have it's much easier just to have those, like I said, bullet points rather than like a paragraph. So, and if you have questions on that action statement, we can, again, address any specific questions at the end.
Yep, and just so everybody knows, I dropped the link for the resume packet and in the chat box, and also Sue was mentioning the ONET. So that's a Department of Labor website that you can go in. As she was saying, you could type in a role like cashier or waiter, and it helps provide you with some language to, I guess we could say, fancy it up, or if you're not sure, how do I make this sound, how do I write more than one thing about my job? This, each occupation Department of Labor puts on there, they have anywhere from 12 to 30 different bullet point statements. So you can look at that, get some ideas, obviously put it in your own language, but it'll give you a place to start. And similarly, like with Indeed, you can use really any search engine that's out there to kind of find some samples of other job descriptions to kind of help you with creating your action statements.
Yep. So here's some examples here. Like if you just, listed shift manager, well, that doesn't tell me very much. But then you say manage shift and train staff. That's very helpful to me. But then as you can see, if you get into a little more detail and you say manage and train a 6 to 8 person staff, assign them duties and enforce the safety rules, that gives me a much better picture of exactly, what you were responsible for doing. So, I think that's a good, example of, what you can start with and what you can end up with if you, kind of put a little bit more detail, and that's much more helpful to, to an employer. So, okay, and here's some other, examples, and as you can see, the wording that they're using, words like develop and compile and assist, coordinate. So those are the kind of words that you're going to, want to use. So, think about what you actually did, and then, come up with, an action verb that fits that, and then expand on it, So, for example, this individual who was a camp counselor, say, coordinated activities for summer learning exploration program for children ages 6 to 12, and they put where the the individuals were from. So this gives somebody a good idea as to the environment that the person was in, the children that they were working with, and so it is helpful to to get those details in while being concise at the same time. So. And again, like I said earlier, the number of bullet points is really going to depend on, the relevance of the job and how long ago that, that job was. So. Okay, so some of the other things other than work experiences that you're going to want to include. So here it says other experience. So, maybe you've already had an internship and you're currently working somewhere, whether it's in retail or whatever it is, but you're going to include your current job and you had an internship already. But you might want to, include something else that you've done in the past, where you were there for a period of time, or some other experience that you're currently doing. And as you can see here, it's not going to take up a huge amount of your resume, but it still gives you the opportunity to present some information that you think should be included on the resume. And then, with regards to the extracurricular activities, this is a good way to present them so that, first of all, the employer or the school that you're applying to has an idea as to what was your role in that activity that you participated in. So, were you a member? This person, had, a variety of different experiences. One of them, they were a co-captain. So that kind of gives someone, the idea or the knowledge that this person had a leadership role in that particular, activity that they were involved in. So, it's important for you to, to put what your role was in those activities. And then you would put, what type of organization it was, and then where it was, and the dates that you, participated. So sometimes I tell individuals the way that it's presented here, all of these are within, Bridgewater State University. The other option that you do have is to list, Bridgewater State first, and then put all of the, the activities that you were involved in within that environment. Okay, so skills. So, this is a pretty broad, area, and, it's very, individual, depending on, each person. But some individuals may not have like language skills or, anything like that. So the heading that you would use for that area will depend on, what you're going to list there. So, if you're going to just list computer skills, you can call it that. You can put computer skills. And what I do recommend, if you're going to list computer skills, please make sure that you are at least, fairly proficient with those computer skills. I don't recommend, that you list something if I've seen that before. I know what it can do. I think that, if you list a computer skill, like I said, you should have some proficiency with it. So, a lot of individuals do ask that question, do you need to include things like LinkedIn? I'm not sure you really do. Depends on people that may be going into things like marketing, communications, those types of fields. Those things you may want to include because they may be things that are going to be relevant to your job, and they want to know that you are familiar with those things. So again, you're going to have to look at what's appropriate for you, and what the position is, or grad program that you might be applying to. This also lists languages. So if you have skills other than computer, this is how you would present it. So, if you do have language skills, I think it's very important that you include that, because, I think it's a global, environment in most companies. So it is very helpful to know whether somebody's going to bring, a skill set like that, to your work environment. So, I think setting it apart like that is important. So, some of the other skills that, you may include are things like certifications, maybe depending on if you're going into education, maybe you have a certification in CPR and first aid. You might want to include that there. So there are, other skills that may be relevant that, you're going to want to include, that may be helpful to, the employers. So. Okay, so we talked about most of the major, areas that you're going to include, most individuals will include on their resume. There are others that, you may want to include. And again, it's going to depend on, how much information you have already. But, you're going to try and keep the resume to one page. That may be difficult for some of you. So you may need to make some, decisions as to, what you include and what you don't include. And again, it may be depending on the position that you are applying to, what you include and what you don't. So you may have to have, 2 resumes or whatever it is that you need. But, there are certain, you know, ways that you can present information and include as much as you can. But things like if you are a biology major, it may be very important that you include, the, lab skills that you have and, kind of things that you've been involved with and are proficient with. So, that's going to be important. There are other types of situations that, like I always look to see whether accounting students are actually members of the Mass Society of CPAs. I want to know that. Are they a student member, and do they feel it's important enough to join their professional, association? So that would be something that I would want to see, on a resume. For individuals that have done presentations, it is important that if you participated in some type of a conference and you've actually presented in front of a large group, and it's something that's relevant, that is something that you should make a point of including on your resume. So these areas are really individual, and you're going to have to make a decision as to what is important and what is not. A lot of people do ask if they should include an objective, and what I typically will say is, unless you, I mean, I think it's easier that if you're going to include a cover letter, or, you're going to email the resume, I think it's a lot easier to present kind of your objective in that, in that context. On a resume, most individuals have enough information that they're going to present that you really don't need to put an objective on there. But again, if you think it's important and it's something you want to include, you can go ahead, but I would make sure that it is something that is pretty clear and concise. You don't want a paragraph, just a couple of sentences. So, I don't think that, you need to put a big, long explanation, under your objective. So, and this is an example here under honors and awards. So, this can also, typically it goes like right after your education. And, if you want to present it in this particular format, rather than just putting it directly under the education, you can. Research, this gives individuals a good idea as to how to present. If you are a, psychology student and you're working with a professor that you are, doing research with that individual, it is important that that is something that you should present. And this gives you a good idea as to, how you present that information, because it's important that you put, the type of research that you're doing, who you're doing that, research with, when you did it, and then kind of what the outcome of that research was, and what your role was in conducting that research. So again, these are special areas that are included on a resume if it's something that is important based on your, education. So related coursework, I tell students that this could be important if you are applying to an internship. So for instance, accounting students, when, they apply to internships at my firm, I do like to see, well, have they already taken, audit? Have they taken, a tax class? How many accounting classes, are they through the, intermediate accounting? So the related coursework can be very helpful. But again, I would make it so that you only include things that are relevant. You don't need to, include, kind of your general kind of, courses that everybody needs to take. They are typically, courses that are related to the degree that you are, taking. And, what you can do too is, if you're looking at internships, they may be asking for, specific items, and you may want to include, you may not have done that in any particular job, but you have a course that you've taken that is very relevant to that. So, that would be important to include, on the resume. So this is also an example of some other related skills that individuals may include. So, and a lot of them are related to things like, biology and just could be, marketing things or programming, so again, very personal areas that might be relevant to you and not to others. So. Okay, so how do you, once you've got all your information put together and you're going to, type up your resume, what you need to consider is, what is the format that you're going to use? And I can tell you right now, I don't recommend using, they have those, I guess, templates that individuals can go in and just, kind of try and plug in. I don't recommend using those. I recommend, just, typing it yourself. But, make sure that when you are, putting the resume together that, you're consistent with the fonts that you're using and, make sure that it is professional, it's professional looking. And, those are two examples that you can use. Make sure that the size of your typing is not too big, not too small. So usually it's somewhere between 10 and 12 point. So, depending on how much information, you do have a little bit of leeway there. So, that could be helpful to you. With regards to headings, again, they tend to be a little bit bigger than, the other areas in the resume. But again, please make sure that you are consistent in the way that you're presenting those headers. Make sure they're the same size, you're using the same font. And then things like bolding, italics, underline, all caps. Absolutely, you can utilize those tools. But again, be consistent and, you don't need to overdo it with them. I can say that, there are examples of resumes, for instance, maybe a graphic design, student who may want to fancy up their resume a little bit. So again, it's going to depend on the area that you are in. But, for most, professional environments, you're not going to need to put any, real fancy stuff there. But it is nice to, to make it look neat and include some of those things for emphasis. The paper, of course, everybody knows that in most environments now, you're going to email your resume. So I just wanted to make a comment about that. So some individuals are using Macs. I know that, and I have had individuals that will send me a resume. We don't use Macs in our environment. We use, a regular PC. So please make sure if you are using a Mac that you make sure that when you are sending it over, that it comes through the way that you want it to look, because I have had individual circumstances where somebody sends it to me and I open it up and I go, oh gosh, what happened? So just make sure that you, check that before you email it. With regards to, if you're going to hand somebody, like if you're going to a job fair and you're going to physically have resumes with you, just make sure that you are using quality paper. And again, don't put it on, pink paper or whatever, keep it simple and professional. You should always just use white or off-white, paper, and make sure that it prints well. You don't want to give somebody a resume that, has, it's too light to read or it's spotty and, something has come through really well and, others do not. So, make sure that you use a good printer, when you are printing the resume. And if you are going to include references in your cover sheet, make sure that they all match and, are, it's a good package when you do, give it to the individual. Okay. And so, final tips, about your resumes. So as I mentioned, I think earlier, so try to keep the resume to one page. Sometimes if you've got a lot of information, individuals that have, they might have a couple of internships, they're currently working a full-time job, they are, playing a sport, they're also in a sorority. Sometimes there are circumstances where it's relevant and good to have the 2 pages, but in most circumstances, I would recommend that you try and keep it to the 1 page. I already mentioned, again, don't use the templates. It's really much better and easier for you if you just, type it yourself. And converting your resume to a PDF, and that makes it easier for you to just send it over when you are applying, online. And high school experience, if you're a freshman, I don't see any issue with you including some of the experiences that you had while you were in high school. But hopefully by the time you get to the end of your sophomore year, you will now have experiences that are more relevant in your, college experience, whether, whatever you've gotten yourself involved in. So, I think after your freshman year, you really should be able to eliminate, the high school, experiences that you've had. So this mentions if you have impressive and relevant online materials, you can include links. So like I said, if you have a LinkedIn and you think it's important that you'd really like somebody to look at your profile, then include it. If you've done something where you, have a blog that you think is relevant, give the information that is helpful. So, and, you can include those on your resume. And of course, the last thing is the school does have a great career services department. So take advantage of it. So, before you send anything out, take the time to go down and, or at this point, set up a virtual meeting with somebody from career services for them to review the resume with you. It's important, and they can give you some good insight and help with how you present that information. So take advantage of the resources that you have.
So right now we are setting up virtual one-on-one meetings with students. And so both in the packet and any of the materials that we provide to you will have our contact information on there. So all you need to do is give the office a call, and our office manager will either be able to pick up or return your voicemail and set up that, one-on-one virtual meeting with you for resumes or really any of those pieces. And of course, obviously, hopefully, fingers crossed, everything will be back to normal. We'll be back on campus in the fall. And if so, we'll probably be offering in both mediums. But when on campus, we are in the Rondeau Student Union in Broome 104. So when we're there, that's when you can access. And so right now we are hosting appointments, standard hours, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. So just give our office a call and we can definitely set up a time to work with you.